the United Nations Security Council after giving an approval for the multinational force, which Kenya is taking a lead. And of course, also the president was very sanguine and optimistic that this is going to be a success. Amid also criticism that is coming also from the civil society regarding the record of the human rights violation of a Kenyan police force, and also the expertise and wherewithal regarding how also the violence is, or the gangs in Haiti are right now. We shall also be hearing from Ambassador Rasas Wencha, who is just fresh from Rwanda, where the AU is trying to make sure that the Agenda 2063 is being streamlined. What are the milestones so far, and what mileage do we have so that we can actually reach and realize these goals of Agenda 2063 here? We shall be discussing also what is happening in Sudan, where we have ethnicization going on and a genocide, where there was a discovery of 1,000 people, and this were buried in mass graves there. We shall be looking and interrogating what the situation is in Sudan right now. And also Dr. Hassan Kaneja will tell us a forum that they had last week regarding the situation in Sudan. What are some of the hallmarks, or the highlights I should say, that really came up from that particular conference that they had last week as well. There's a lot that we'll have to cover this morning, so you get to drive a show with me as well, which is of course at KTN News. KTN News is also our Twitter handle. You can follow us at Dibalane as well, is my Twitter handle. You can chime in also. You can fire your questions or paper also your criticism on that particular forum as well. But for now, let's see how the weather will be today. These are the dailies this morning. Ruto Raila clash of ideas at dialogue meeting is what is on the front page of the Standard this morning. Different strokes, as Azimio and Kenya Kwanza yesterday differed on Kenya's future on how to resolve electoral injustices when they submitted their views to the National Dialogue Committee. Government side wants nothing to do with an audit of last year's election, whereas the opposition still insists it won and a review is needed. This story is on page 6 of the Standard this morning. And also, Nyamira boss survives MCA's ouster is another story you want to follow there. Nyamira governor's problems eased after MCA's could not marshal enough votes to get him impeached. All the 16 voted to remove him. Amos Nyaribo, while 18 defended him. And you can follow the story on page 16 of the Standard this morning. Peace mission or West set up? That is a question there. Case of Haiti. And the UN has given a nod to the mission to be led by Kenya, but critics wonder how it will be done, where many have failed. However, the president saying no retreat, no surrender. He is very sanguine and optimistic regarding this particular Haiti mission, and that we had the United Nations Security Council giving a thumbs up yesterday of approval, and Kenya is taking the lead with the mission in Haiti right now. That is a multinational force that will make sure they try and clamp down and stanch the flow of violence in Haiti that has had a storied history so far of being very heavily backed in that particular country, violence and gangsters running the country. Turning point for Catholic Church. A crucial meeting in Vatican is supposed to give direction on myriad issues facing the church. And one of the ticklish issues right now is the blessings or now officiating the marriage of the gay couple. And this has been a very contentious issue right now. And Pope Francis has been touted as one of the progressive Pope. And in light of what we are facing in this epoch of time right now, those are very crucial issues, especially where church is getting divided. You remember also the Anglican Church as well, especially from this global south. They were not really on the same vein or on the same platform as far as the Europe or the UK is concerned regarding the stand on blessing the gay couple or officiating their marriage as well. And this seems those of the Catholic Church is picking up that stuff, and this is bound to spark a lot of debate. We are waiting to see also what the Conference of the Catholic Bishops here in the country will have to say regarding this as well. Enterprise Magazine comes in handy for you every Wednesday. Get all the words as far as entrepreneurship is concerned. And Newcastle's big moment in Europe as well is another story that you can follow there if you've been doggedly following what is happening as far as the EPL is concerned. This is a Standard. Let's just cross over to Daily Nation and see what is holding for us. Ruto reverses Uhuru's 6 billion shillings telecom buyout is another story that you want to follow inside the Daily Nation this morning. Acquisition draw. Remember, this was such a heavy debate there that we had last year. And now there are questions regarding it and answers regarding it as well. Now we can see a buyout being cancelled. The Kenya Kwanza government yesterday overturned a decision by the Uhuru Kenyatta administration to purchase a 60% stake in Telecom Kenya just days to the 2022 general election, and directed UK private investment fund Helios and its Kenyan affiliate Jamhuri Holdings to refund money paid for the acquisition. You have a story tucked away on page 7 of the Daily Nation this morning. And also Kenya Kwanza's Azimio clash over IBC poll audit is another story that you want to follow. President William Ruto and opposition leader Raila Odinga have once again clashed over the reconstitution of the electoral agency and demand for an audit of last year's presidential election results, while Mr. Odinga's team insisted on a forensic audit to establish the truth about the 2022 polls. We have President's side saying the Supreme Court's ruling was final, done and dusted. You have a story on page 4 of the Daily Nation this morning. How Nyaribo survived ouster is another story that you want to follow inside the Daily Nation, tucked away on page 5 of today's daily. And also looking at the teaser panic as 95 Iregi girls, students, taken ill. mysterious disease break out of school, and you can follow the story on page 10. And of course, parents have interpretations and fear, doggedly following what happened also to Mukumu girls. Now Regi seems also to be headed that way. So far, we shall be putting tails on this story and giving you all the gritty details regarding this particular strange disease. Also, cricket's YouTube girl Quinto dreams big. You can follow her story inside the Daily Nation on page 37 this morning. Let's see what the star is holding for us. Secret agents to spy on state officials' account. And this is all in a bid to try and clamp down on money laundering. Tough rules and pensions are coming into force. Remember also that act has been streamlined. Tough new rules meant to curb money laundering and terrorism financing. And this story continues on page 4 and 5 of the Star this morning. 40 families are left homeless after heavy winds destroy houses. This is now the reality of the climate change. And also this is just a bellwether that El Nino is on its way. And you can see families right now getting affected as well. Roofs are devastated there. Nature's fury, a house destroyed and tree felled by heavy winds in Mbale, Busia County on Monday. On the side by Ruto, Raila teams clash over audit of 2022 election. President William Ruto and opposition chief Raila Odinga's camps yesterday clashed over the audit of the 2022 presidential election, with the ruling coalition calling for planners of demos banned from elections. Appearing separately before the National Dialogue Committee at Bomas of Kenya, the two sides hit at each other hit at each over the 2022 presidential election results that saw William Ruto declared winner with 200,000 votes. You have this story continuing on page 6 of the Star this morning. Kenya to get newly approved malaria vaccine in 2024 is another story that you can actually get all the details fleshed out for you on page 2 of the Star this morning. And 586,000 posts up for grabs as Ruto party gears up for grassroots polls. You have this story on page 7 of the Star this morning. If we buckle down to Business Daily, Kenyans are defaulting on 596 billion shillings as interest rates hit ceiling. Bad loans hit 16-year high of 15% in August. CBK data show default rate worst since June 2007. This is many years back, and it says Kenyan borrowers have now defaulted on more than 596 billion shillings in loans as rising interest rates wreak havoc of the country's banking sector loans books, setting up more households and businesses for a fresh round of auctions and property seizures as lenders move to recover bad loans. Latest data from Central Bank of Kenya shows that the stock of non-performing loans in Kenya surged to 16-year high of 15% in August, up from 14.5% in July. And of course, we are waiting for the other shoe to drop as well. We had the Monetary Policy Committee meeting yesterday, and the indications that also the interest rate could be rising to almost nearing or teetering on the edge of 20%. You can read the rest of the details there inside the Business Daily this morning. On the sidebar, Ruto debt, please increase Kenya's distress fears. Global investors have demanded for the first time since May more than 18% return to invest in Kenya's Eurobond, which matures in 9 months. That is the reality right now. And will we default? Vivo Energy to cement dominance with Luxo deal, and Netflix and free plan for Kenyan subscribers from November. Streaming service provider Netflix is discontinuing its free plan in Kenya starting next month in what promises to cut off thousands of subscribers who have enjoyed complimentary access since 2021. You can follow the story inside the Business Daily. Elevated fuel and electricity prices spoke Kenyans. This is what CEOs are saying. The elevated fuel and electricity prices have cut the purchasing power of consumers, hurting demand for goods and services. A Central Bank of Kenya survey capturing concerns of Kenyan chief executive has shown, and the CPK said its latest CEOs and market perception survey had shown increased concerns on the rise in fuel and electricity prices, which usually filters into the economy through increased cost of other goods and services And the sentiments come on the back of the continuing weakening of the Kenyan shilling, doubling of value-added tax on fuel to 16%, and rising crude oil prices having led to a record high fuel prices for Kenyans. The story continues on page 2 of the Business Daily, and that is the reality on the ground. Now the CBK also warning that the purchasing power of Kenyans is wanting. We saw also lots of cars yesterday. They're left on the parking lots at home. They're not on the roads anymore because it is just not affordable anymore for a person to actually be using his car right now with the heavy fuel. All right, we shall be showing you what is happening in Uganda and Tanzania. But for now, my guests are already here in the studio. Just want to hear their voices before we buckle down to some of the stories that we've lined up for you this morning. I'm holding court this morning with Dr. Hassan Kanyenje, who is the director of the Horn Institute. Also, we have with us the chair of Africa Capacity Building Foundation, Ambassador Erastus Mwenche. We're holding court with Dr. Ken Ombogi, who is a historian from the University of Nairobi. And also, we're holding court with Yusuf Hassan, who is a member of Parliament, Kamukunji, and also who is a member of the Defense and Foreign Relations Committee in the National Assembly. A lot that we have to cover today as far as diplomacy, also security and foreign policy is concerned. But let's just hear from our panelists this morning, fresh from the beds or wherever they're coming from, and fresh from Rwanda. Let's begin with you, Ambassador Erastus Mwenche. Good to see you. Good morning.
Good morning, Dibal, and let me say hello to my fellow panelists.
Yes.
And also the viewers. Yes, I just came back from Rwanda yesterday. There was a ministerial retreat focusing on Agenda 2063. Essentially, to look at what has happened in the last 10 years. As you know, Agenda 2063 is really a framework for Africa to continue on its journey of integration and prosperity, culminating in a united Africa by 2063.
Yes.
And there are roadmaps that guide that journey to 2063. And the ministerial retreat was attended by ministers of finance and also ministers of planning and of course ministers of the Executive Council. In a summary, the review of course looked at what has happened in the last 10 years. Some of the key areas, as you know, Agenda 2063 has 20 goals. And these 20 goals mirror with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. In fact, the history of it is that Agenda 2063 was done and prepared between 2013 and 2015. The UN Sustainable Goals were adopted in 2015 for us Sustainable Development Goals 2030.
Yes.
And many of the leaders who participated in preparing Agenda 2063 influenced the outcome of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. As a matter of fact, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon that time appointed President Johnson, who was part of the AU framework, who prepared the AU Agenda 2063 to also prepare Sustainable Development Goals. So in a way, when you want to look at what has happened, Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2063 is a mixed bag. Some success, some failures, especially in some of the areas that are of critical concern, where Africa and of course globally, world has not made a lot of progress, especially in peace and security, democracy. As you know, that the world has receded in many ways on areas of democracy and peace and security, with all these global tensions.
Right.
But in a number of areas, there has also been success.
Yeah, you will tell us. You will tell us. I think. Because we're just getting introductory remarks. Don't give us a whole hog right now.
Okay, good.
When we get on that side, you will tell us more on what are we really on traction as well. All right. Let's hear from Dr. Hassan Kanyenje. Also, you had a conference last week, and this was solely focusing on what is happening in Sudan. Lots of human rights violations that we do have right now. But what was the outcome? What really informed the conference? What are some of the recommendations?
Yes, since you say we cannot get into the meat until much later.
Yes.
Yeah, the reason I was missing in action last week from this panel was because we had organized a 2-day conference on Sudan. And that's in the light of, number one, Kenya's own efforts to lead, the process, IGAD process in Sudan, but also the potential implications that the collapse of Sudan can have on the entire region. And of course, one critical perhaps takeaway, because we had actors from key countries and delegates from key countries and presenters who understand, including Ambassador Mwencha was one of our presenters there, the need for a unified approach. There's been a multiplicity of efforts, whether it's Jeddah or the Egyptian Neighbor Summit or the Quartet, and they seem to be moving in different directions. And so to the extent that unified approach is required was something that was heavily, of course, emphasized. But critically, that ultimate intervention should be African in nature, that is endorsed, of course, by international actors, including the United Nations. Because what we have seen is, right now, a number of processes have faltered. And so how do we go about it in a way that is actually going to bear results, considering competing interests of some of those interventions that are currently taking place? Yes.
Well, that's fantastic. You'll tell us more about that as well. Let's hear from Dr. Ken.
Yeah, thank you, Libal. Well, I think for me the highlight of the week was that we celebrated the United Nations International Day for Nonviolence, which took place at the University of Nairobi on the 2nd, that's on Monday. And I was one of the speakers because of my interest in the ideals of Mahatma Gandhi, that legendary soul of India. Incidentally, the International Day for Nonviolence coincides with Mahatma Gandhi's birthday, 2nd of October, when he was born in 1869. And what came out of that gathering at the University of Nairobi in the course of the week is that probably if there is a continent that needs the message of nonviolence, is the continent of Africa. And this comes amidst all this that we are seeing around, coup d'etats in the western part of the continent, a bit of worrying levels of instability virtually in every region of the continent. And as many speakers concurred, I think much more probably than any other part of the world, Africa needs the message of non-violence. And probably we'll see that more as we move.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yusuf Hassan, good morning, good to see you.
Good morning.
Yes.
Well, legislatively, it has been a very busy week. We've had a series of meetings and discussions in Parliament, but people don't realize that much of the business of Parliament takes place within the committees, structures. So I belong to the Committee for Defense, Intelligence and Foreign Affairs, and we've had a number of engagements with the state organizations that we oversight. And I also belong to the National Cohesion and Equal Opportunities Committee. So in both committees we have been relatively busy. And of course, as a member of Parliament, you also have your constituency activities. You have two masters.
So you've got a lot of folks to juggle.
Both of them have to be taken care of.
There's a national cohesion bill as well that I don't know if it's come to the floor of the House yet or even to be broached by the committee, and where they're seeking to have a lot of maybe teeth to have prosecutorial powers that they've been seeking. They think that they can be more effective if they're given those powers. From your assessment, do you think that National Cohesion and Integration Commission's bill?
Yeah, indeed. I think they don't have much teeth at the moment. They may do the reports, they may know who the culprits are, but unfortunately they don't have the capacity to follow it up, and they usually hand it over to the security, to the police, to the anti-corruption and other institutions that are mandated to do those things.
Thank you. Right, we shall be looking at that. Okay. Now, the Kenya Kwanza Alliance and the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition locked horns during the last day, if you could just roll up presentations of public memoranda to the National Dialogue Committee, as both teams clashed over the hot issue of opening the IBC service. While the opposition, Azimio, is pushing for the audit of the IBC service, the ruling coalition is completely opposed to the idea. Meanwhile, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission has dismissed recommendations by the Council of Governors to have immunity of office, claiming there was no grace period for impunity. KTN's Political Affairs reporter Emmanuel Toll starts us off.
The last day of presentations of public memoranda to the National Dialogue Committee saw the biggest stakeholders in the talks, the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition and their Kenya Kwanza counterparts clash, with the contentious matter of opening the IBC servers taking center stage. The ruling Kenya Kwanza Alliance was the first to face the panel, with Secretary Generals representing UDA, ANC and Ford Kenya parties putting up a case on the 5 thematic issues of discussions, opposing any plans to reopen the electoral agency servers.
If you think that the 2022 general elections were not fair enough, the provisions of the Constitution are very clear that you have an opportunity at the Supreme Court to go and challenge the decision of IBC.
Kenya Kwanza also wants those found culpable of leading illegal, outlawed and violent demonstrations to be barred from vying for elective positions. But even before the dust could settle on their submissions, their opponents, the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya, were putting up a spirited push for the opening of the very servers.
It is by auditing that then we can know what we are fixing. What is the problem that we are fixing with IEBC? So why audit? First of all, there are different numbers from the IEBC server, from the portal.
Azimio also made a presentation on the high cost of living.
Why isn't the cost of living coming down? And we have demonstrated that it is because the regime is mismanaging public finances. We have demonstrated is that because the regime is maintaining a very high deficit.
On its part, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission also started its submission by poking holes into the recommendation by the Council of Governors to have an impeachment motion against them barred 2 years after elections and a year before the polls.
I think that kind of request, it will create more chaos than accountability. Because what they are telling us is that they are ready for responsibility, but they are not ready for accountability. And we say that responsibility minus accountability is equal to corruption. No grace period for impunity.
It therefore requires that we focus, and we have focused our attention on high-impact cases and on high-impact individuals.
The Parliamentary caucus, consisting of over 27 members of parliament, also made their pitch for an additional 11 counties, crying foul over marginalization over years.
When BBI was happening, several communities, actually similar, the same communities that are here today before.
Honorable Marwa, I asked specific question.
Yes.
You are members of parliament.
I am coming to that.
Just go straight to that. Whatever BBI, just go straight to that. To save time.
Yes, we have a bill, proposed bill, that is yet to be tabled in Parliament.
Members of the clergy, including the National Council of Churches of Kenya, NCCK, and the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops, also lauded the ongoing dialogue process, saying it was the only way to resolve the issues bedeviling the country. The last day saw the presentations run into the night as the committee rushed against time to have most of those available make their submissions. And after receiving public memoranda and oral submissions from various groups, the National Dialogue Committee will now be retiring to come up with a report that will be tabled in Parliament in the next few days before a month's conclusion of the timeline that was given for the committee to conclude its activities. Emmanuel Toll, KTN News, Bomas, Nairobi.
Now, Kenya is set to deploy troops to Haiti after the UN Security Council voted to send a Kenyan-led multinational security force to help Haiti government combat violent gangs. The resolution to approve the force got 13 votes in favor, but Russia and China abstained. And as KTN's Daniel Kiruki reports, President William Ruto has welcomed the approval, saying the mission was a moral obligation for the international community.
Haiti has been grappling with a series of crises, including gang violence, kidnappings, and political instability. The Caribbean country of more than 11 million people had requested international assistance during the just concluded UN Assembly. Haitian Prime Minister Ari Henry called on the Security Council for a multinational security, police, and military support mission.
I came here today to let you know that we have no intention of any form to prejudge the neighbors with whom we share our island and with whom we must coexist.
Kenya taking the lead in proposing to send troops to Haiti, pledging 1,000 police to spearhead the mission, a move that would see President William Ruto recognized by US President Joe Biden.
I thank President Ruto of Kenya's, I thank him for his willingness to serve as the lead nation of a UN-backed security support mission. I call on the Security Council to authorize this mission now. The people of Haiti cannot wait much longer.
And on Monday, the UN Security Council endorsed the deployment of the Multinational Security Support MSS mission to Haiti, paving way for Kenya to send their pledged armed personnel. A move welcomed by President William Ruto.
We are delighted for the support this mission has attracted globally because it makes us stronger and success feasible.
Several other Caribbean nations, including Antigua, Bermuda, the Bahamas, and Jamaica, have also offered support. The force will have a 12-month mandate in Haiti. Washington has committed to support the Kenyan-led mission and would work with the Congress to secure $100 million, which is 14 billion Kenyan shillings. However, Kenyan analysts are split on the need to send the police to Haiti. Professor of History and International Relations, Professor Mashere Munene, questions preparedness, saying, and I quote, "The country has been a source of apprehension for many nations, making the mission significantly high risk," end of quote.
We shall succeed in Haiti. We must not fail the people of Haiti.
However, a section of analysts say, apart from helping stabilize Haiti, on the global stage, sending Kenyan police to Haiti gives Kenyan political capital, as in the eyes of the world, Kenya will become a dependable ally who is willing to help other countries. The forces are expected in Haiti by end of the year. Daniel Kariuki, KTN.
We shall be looking at that as well. Just latest development, approval from the UN Security Council. We discussed this last week, and finally, we're here. Let's turn the crack now to see how also security and the hygiene of students is in Eregi Girls, where 95 students from St. Teresa Eregi Girls High School in Kakamega County have been admitted in various health facilities after suffering from a strange disease. The students exhibited symptoms like weak limbs and difficulties in walking. Hundreds of anxious parents showed up at the institution, insisting on leaving with their daughters, even though the regional education office, in a meeting with other health stakeholders and the school management, agreed not to close the school. And as Alan Ochanda now reports, samples have been taken to Kemri for further analysis.
Anxiety was palpable at Eregi Girls High School in Kakamega County after 95 students at the institution were admitted after suffering from an unknown strange disease. The students were exhibiting weakness of the limbs and difficulties in walking.
Kuna wanafunzi 20 wenye wako kwa hospitali ya Iguhu. Kuna wanafunzi 30 wenye wako kwa hospitali kuu ya Kakamega County, na tuko na wanafunzi 31 wenye wako Mukumu Mission Hospital, na tuko na wanafunzi 14 wenye wako Shibwe Hospital. Hao wanafunzi walianza na shida ya kuumwa na miguu kutokea kwa magoti, alafu wakashindwa kutembea, hawatembei vizuri.
According to the school management, the affected learners began showing the symptoms on Monday evening. 65 were admitted on Monday, but the remaining were admitted Tuesday. A doctor at the County General Hospital who sought anonymity said preliminary investigations pointed at possible elevated electrolytes, a condition caused by loss of fluids in the body. He said the possibility of bacterial infection had been ruled out as symptoms exhibited have no direct link to it. The girl's samples have been taken to Kemri with the results expected Wednesday. Samples of dry cereals from the food stores and from their cooked food also taken for testing.
Principal's offices. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
Agitated parents who showed up attempted to storm the principal's office, claiming there was lack of information relaying structure.
Administration pande ya communication wamefail. Kama ungeni-inform uniambie yenyewe mtoto amegonjeka lakini ameshughulikiwa hivi hata sisi kuwa na wasiwasi. Lakini mimi napata hiyo habari kutoka kwa mtandao na ni kitu imekuwa walifaa kutujulisha kama wazazi. Sasa hapo kidogo wameanguka.
Kufika kwa shule naona tension. Nikauliza ni nini inaendelea? Ndio nikaulizia, wakaniambia niende niulize nini? Niende niulize deputy. Kwenda kwa deputy ndio akaanza kunieleza vile hii attack ilianza, vile watoto wamekuwa up to mali wamefika.
At the Kakamega County General Hospital, affected girls too weak to walk that they were to be wheeled on these wheelchairs. Earlier this year, Mukumu Girls High School in the same county of Kakamega suffered a more severe disease attack that they lost 3 students and a teacher. Parents at Eregi, in reference to the unfortunate incident, insisting on being given their daughters to accompany them. However, Western Region Education Office, after a meeting with health stakeholders, resolved to have the school session ongoing.
Nilichukua hatua kuja kupiga simu kwa shule kwanza, lakini hakuna mwalimu alishika simu yangu. Kujaribu kuangalia kwa wall ya class ikawa imefungwa. There is no way tungeweza kucommunicate. So sijaweza kulala usiku kwa sababu ukiona picha zile zilikuwa zinaonyeshwa watoto hawatembei, wako paralyzed.
Sisi tunaomba kama wazazi wale watoto ambao bado wako shuleni hawako affected twende nao nyumbani kwa sababu watoto wako na wasiwasi na hatuwezi kuwaacha nyuma. Afadhali tuende nao tujue what's going on.
Us as the education sector, we are going to follow up and make sure that the school implements the suggestions that have given us so that we don't have a breakdown. Because if you don't pass information to the parents, then you create panic from them because they get several information from other sources which might not be true.
Even as the 95 girls from Eregi Girls continue getting medication, a decision has been arrived at not to close the school as they await the results of the samples taken to Kemri to establish what ails them. Alan Ochanda, KTN News.
And President William Ruto has directed ministries to cut their 2023-2024 budget by 10% to align expenditures with available resources amidst the global economic stress. While chairing a cabinet meeting at State House in Nairobi, President Ruto emphasized the need for the government to exercise prudence in resource utilization, firmly stating that wastage and corruption will not be tolerated. The head of state also issued a warning to government officials seeking to bypass the use of unified payment system, insisting it was a necessity for better oversight to mitigate price fluctuations. The cabinet agreed to set aside 4 billion shillings to purchase maize from farmers. Furthermore, the cabinet noted the importance of supporting farmers in drying and storing the produce to mitigate post-harvest losses. Additionally, the cabinet approved the Gambling Policy 2023, the Gambling Control Bill 2023, and the National Lottery Bill 2023, which will be forwarded to Parliament for enactment. The bills seek to serve as a framework for transforming gambling industry into a force for social progress. And lastly, continued delay to declare current season maize producers' price and anticipated El Niño rain phenomenon is exposing farmers to exploitation and middlemen in cereals producing regions. Anxiety has prompted maize farmers in the North Rift region to a rushed harvesting following Meteorological Department advisory on the enhanced rains from the second week of October. A move that has seen traders flock to the region and take advantage of vulnerable farmers. Elvis Koske has more of this.
A spot check by KTN News in the region found some farmers harvesting maize as others and dry produce that has been harvested early. Traders are taking advantage of producers who lack proper storage facilities are now disposing their produce to curb further expenses.
Mafuta imeendelea kuongezeka, so sisi kama wakulima we are affected. Kwanza kabisa ningependa nishukuru our president kwa sababu walituletea mbolea, hiyo ninashukuru. Ningependa pia kama mkulima niseme ya kwamba tutengenezewe bei ya mahindi kwa hivi sasa, kwa sababu tunaona ya kwamba price ya mahindi imedrop na middlemen wana take advantage. So ninaomba ya kwamba wa president atupatie the new price ya mahindi ili maisha ya mkulima isonge mbele.
Ni kidogo sana, nafikiri watu wanauza kwa sori ya shida kidogo. Watoto wanafanya mtihani, wengine wamefukuzwa nyumbani na mtihani inakaribia. So they sell it at throw away. Wanauza kwa hiyo bei ya chini sababu ya mashida.
The current farm gate price of a 90 kg bag has dropped to 3,700 shillings from as high as 4,500 recently.
So ningependa tu ni request Mr. President ya kwamba tupewe bei mzuri ya mahindi yetu kwanza tuuze, ndio ashughulikie hiyo ya kuimport ili wakulima tusikuwa affected kabisa, kwa sababu maisha ya sasa imekuwa ngumu.
Pia serikali wakuje apatie sisi kweli, na wale wenye wana shamba kidogo wajaribu hata wasaidia au kupatia fedha kidogo.
Farmers now say unless the government declares a producer price of not less than 5,500 shillings per 90 kg bag and procure farmers' produce through the NCPB depot, there might be an acute food shortage next year. Elvis Kosgei, KTN News, Uasin Gishu County.
Those are the stories that, of course, forms also the basis of our conversation, looking at what is happening locally, beginning with the national dialogue, and, of course, also with the post-harvest right now, people having trepidations regarding El Nino, and also the storage of the maize as well. That will be a niggling worry. And as Elvis Koske has indicated also, this is a bellwether, maybe, for next year's shortage when it comes to maize flour as well. But let's just continue pace with what is happening currently, and I will begin with you, Yusuf Hassan, especially looking at the national dialogue yesterday. It seems now IBC, the elections and the servers seem to be primarily taking now center stage, and everyone has been talking, are we losing really traction of this national dialogue, because it seems like it's a claptrap of everything. So many confluence of issues are being brought on the table, and some of them are beyond the 5 pillars as well. I don't know what will be your assessment so far, if you've been doggedly following what has been happening.
Well, I think it has gone very well from my perspective, because we had been facing a political crisis, and the two major political forces have agreed to engage in dialogue instead of violence. Yes. So that by itself is a significant move that we should not lose sight of. But of course, like in any other dialogue, everybody comes with their own ideas. We are a divided country. We have diverse views. And it's not surprising that, in fact, there are disagreements that may be hyped by the media coverage. But to a certain extent, the most important thing is they are seated in the same place. They are talking together. People are going there to present their cases. And I think it is working well for Kenya. We've had a very peaceful period for the time that this dialogue has been taking place. And I believe that something good is going to come out of it. I don't know about the complexity of some of these issues like the SAVA and going back to the elections of 2022, because I think constitutionally we have settled those issues. So it was, for me, even though I was on the other side of the political divide, I believe that our country should move forward, because the tallying has been done. It is a disputed election, but the Supreme Court had made a decision. So I don't see the reason, what the benefit that we would be getting out of reversing the process and going back to August 2022. But of course, some very good ideas also have been brought to this national dialogue. And some of those ideas should be developed to make sure that, in fact, we overcome this problem this perennial problem of every election. You have squabbles that put the country on the brink of a crisis. We must find a solution. Other countries have done. We must have fair and free elections. We must have an independent and effective and well-funded electoral commission. And political parties must agree that in every contest there is a winner and there is a loser. And therefore life must continue onwards. But we must get the consensus from the various political parties to make sure that in fact we take the high road and put our country once and for all on a stable footing.
All right, Erastus Mwenche, what has been your assessment so far?
Sorry?
What has been your assessment?
No, I would agree with Mheshimiwa that if a nation is talking, it's a good thing, because when we stop talking, of course, we fight. Like what happened when we saw demonstrations and the rest. And looking at the issues that are at the table, and the fact that, as you mentioned in the story, that so many issues seem to be emerging, there is nothing wrong with that, because when the nations talk, it's always good to diagnose and see what ails the country. Because the alternative, I mean, when you look at peace eluding us, the costs are very high. The reason we're sending forces to Haiti is because there's a crisis, and this crisis comes because the nation fails to talk to each other. And many other countries we have seen, I mean, Africa is now littered with so many conflicts because people failed to see signals of challenges that face them and how to talk to each other. I think it's important to be honest at the table and agree to see what really ails the country. How do we fix it? For what is worthy, that transparency should accompany the discussions, and the process should then, of course, end in a process in culminating in us having a framework that can put in place, as Mheshimiwa has just said, systems that can ensure that people will have, faith in the institutions that they have, but also in the processes that lead to any frameworks like elections and what have you. Because once you lose that, then you lose the soul of the nation.
Soul of the nation. Let's hear from Dr. Hassan Kanenje. I was expecting also, since this is a public participation, we'll have members of the think tanks as well coming to also put their issues on the table as well. So I haven't seen any of you.
I haven't seen any of us who come on the panel, but there were certainly others, I think, who made an effort.
I haven't seen. Maybe you can tease out one or two that have been there.
There've been quite a few voices that represent, I think, what a number of think tanks also think. And so we did not see the need of showing up in person and crowding the space of others, since we already have a platform that we can also share, ideas. Perhaps just to comment on what seemed like a little bit of a chaotic situation. Anytime we are negotiating our differences in the boardroom and not exchanging missiles on the street, it's always a good time. And that is a sign of progress. Because the alternative to talking, it is unimaginable. And I think we've been there before. Even recently, we were in the streets, and of course, it's not pretty. And such times when you're having a discourse such as this one, the people who are going to come out with demands. We have seen suggestions on post-war Rwandanization of presidential term limits, so we get into 7, something like that. Of course, that's outrageous, but it's part of negotiations, and people are going to throw out ideas. And of course, we're also seeing certain demands coming from the other side. Now, statecraft is essentially a political, art, is a political process. And democracy is essentially a political process in as much as it's a constitutional process. So being able to negotiate all these things is important, or at least appearing to be willing to negotiate, or at least have discussions over them. It is true, as Mheshimiwa has said, constitutionally, the case of elections, was closed, and it's important for people to move forward. I think what perhaps I would say on that is an attempt to appreciate perhaps the concerns from the other, can be helpful, not because we want to change the outcome of the election, for instance, because the Constitution has settled it, and every Kenyan, I think, believes and respects the institutions, and the arms of government, and the judiciary is one of those, and once they make a ruling, of course, that is final. But I think a willingness and desire to listen to each other from both sides is something that is important, because the moment we do not, sometimes people are not going to find room where they're going to recognize things as legitimate, especially politically, in as far, despite the fact constitutionally things being illegitimate. And so I think that willingness is important. And just perhaps to veer off this a little bit, it is also a process, I think, as Kenya, as we plan to deploy in Haiti, we may start having a conversation for them, because today there is also a legitimacy problem in that country with regard to, for instance, who is in power as an acting president, because the president was killed. And so while Constitution can allow them to do certain things, that lack of legitimacy politically can create a lot of problems, including our ability to actually be successful in that theater. And so a process needs to be also started on the other side to ensure that the authorities we're going to deal with are also recognized as legitimate. And so, but I think the comfort personally I get, and as a Kenyan, is we are no longer in the streets and we're actually talking, and we should not be talking at each other. We need to start talking to each other. But democracy is loud, it can be messy, but at the end of the day, it's probably the best form of government that we may have in going forward.
Right, we are a talking nation. They say that democracy begins in conversation. But for the longest time, since we had also the debacle in 2007, it seems we are always in this mode, and we are always expecting the conversations to be carried on after every other election. Do you think now this will be the last, prime solution when we come up with this, maybe recommendations from the National Dialogue Committee itself? Or again, when we have another cycle in 2027, it will be a different kettle of fish altogether?
Thank you, Deepal. First, let me agree with my colleagues here that the sheer fact that, we are talking, the politicians are talking in Bomas, we are out of the streets, the tear gas has gone completely down. That's something we can celebrate about. And also secondly, I said on this forum last week that there is a way in which Kenya is a product of talks. Our history is replete with this binary of we talk, we fight, and then we talk again and then fight. You asked me a much more direct question whether this is the last time we are having such a talks. I very confidently, without any fear of contradiction, say no. We will have many more talks in the future. But the problem we have had, Deepak, before is what are we going to get out of these talks? We talked in the 60s, so-called Lancaster conferences. Who gained out of that? The political leadership. The problems that the country was discussing then, the transition to independence, about land, about fairness, about justice, they were not sorted out entirely. We talked in the 60s, we talked in the 90s. What came out? Political elites shared literally what we loosely call the national cake, and there they were. The problems of the ordinary, everyday Kenyans continued. Cases of injustice, families going without enough to eat, enough to educate their children, basic problems of people. Now, we went to Bomas, if my understanding is well, because of three main reasons. One, we want to know the truth about Kenya's political process. For years now, we have actually come to develop a lot of skepticism in our electoral process. And that, was the case in 2007, and then we come to the years that followed, and even 2022, there are still doubts. People are not sure what happened. We wanted to know the truth about that. Secondly, the cost of living. Kenyans can hardly put, 3 meals on their table every day. The issues of justice and fairness, equity and equality. What is coming out of Bomas, in my view, is the same old script of politicians talking about themselves, about their plight, about their positions, and about who is going to be what, when, and how. Mm-hmm. That is not going to serve our interests. I like what Honorable Hassan said earlier, that the problem has been sorted out constitutionally, using the structures that have been put in place. But Mheshimiwa, our problem is actually not about constitution. Our problem is not about the legal structures that we have and instruments. Our problem is political and ethnic. We need to be able to, find a way of creating confidence and trust in the political structures that our constitution has given us. Because that is actually the problem. I mean, of all the countries in Africa, we have the most liberal constitution. Why have we not been able to implement what is outlined in there in ways that the Constitution envisages of justice, fairness, equality, and equity? It's because of politics of greed, it's because of politics of ethnicity. And I have a feeling that if we are not very careful, bombers will lead us to where we have been. Politicians talking and finding a solution for their problems that don't affect the everyday Kenyans in the streets.
Right. We're due for a station break right now. It is 7 o'clock on the nose from my end. When we circle back, we shall also cross over to Sudan and try to see the situation on the ground there, what is happening currently. We have the mass elite extermination where there is a slaughter of the El Jaina. How Arab fighters carried out a rolling ethnic massacre in Sudan where there have been discovered mass graves carrying 1,000 bodies there and more. And also we shall be looking at the situation in Niger, just giving you the update there where the junta is dismissing Algeria's plan for a 6-month transition there, and a raft of other issues. Also, we have Somalia asking the African Union to reconsider, right, the pulling back of the ATMIS from that particular country, and this is in light of fighting the Al-Shabaab. And the question is, should there also be a resumption of this particular force in Sudan? Who will be in